Quality versus quantity. And I'm curious about how you think about those two things in the way that you approach your music career.
Oh man, quality versus quantity. I guess that's I keep going back to this kind of debate in my head. I guess, at least as it relates to the music or maybe even as a philosophy, like I think quality sort of comes from quantity. I feel like with music, at the beginning, it's just play. You just keep making stuff, and you start making beats, or you just start doing, like, at least with me, like I started messing with GarageBand, doing like guitar ambient pieces. I was all over the map, right? Like, and I just like made. And yeah, I think like you kind of go through that exploratory phase and then figure out like what really inspires you and what sticks, and then you'll kind of pick out the stuff that you like more, and then you'll do that a lot more, and then the quality kind of comes from that. At least that's what I kind of subscribe to.
Right, so it sounds like you're saying kind of like it's important to just, in a way, like get reps and do things a lot in order to figure out what quality could even be for yourself, or where you're going to focus your efforts in the first place. Because when you start out, maybe you don't know where exactly to even put your energy necessarily.
Right, just make, and then figure out what sticks,
Yeah,
I
interesting.
guess.
So as you're making, so let's say you're making a lot of music, how do you define or how do you recognize quality?
A lot of it begins on the guitar, and then like just like piecing together chords that I like, and then developing it. And then how I decide a track is done is basically when I don't really have anything else to add to it or to change, or I don't really have like a clear line test.
Do you release everything that you finish, or is there a line between even being like, okay, this is done and there's nothing I can add to it, and this is something that I'm going to release?
I think this is where I kind of differ from a lot of my peers, where people talk a lot of, especially a lot of the beatmaker community. It's, there's this whole allure of, starting a new beat, all that stuff. I do that too, but I think the OCD part of my brain always catches up to me, and it's like I'm much more obsessed with kind of finishing a song than I am. Sometimes I'll let that urge kind of like override, the urge to start a new beat. Like I'm just like,
yeah,
okay,
interesting. So
I need to finish this track. I know I haven't made any progress in like 3 days, but I'm just gonna, it'll come. I'm just gonna keep pushing. I will admit that I feel like the best tracks, or whatever you want to call it, they come from times when you finish it in like, I don't know, like a night or like 2 nights or whatever, where you just like hit flow state and then you just finish everything in one go. I feel like that's always best stuff, you know what I mean? Or at least they make the best stories.
Yeah, sometimes it just falls out, but that's the cool part.
Yeah, I'm a believer in like just clocking in, and then just even if you're hitting the same walls, you will make progress and finishing it.
Do you finish everything, or are there times where you're like, hey, like I thought this was an idea, but actually it turns out there's nothing here, and what I need to do is either go back to something else that's already in progress or start something completely new?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely stuff that I like try to power through, and it just, like stuff like I make, the night before, and then I wake up and I'm like, oh, this is what I was making, like this? Nah. Okay, no. Like sometimes, it just doesn't cross that threshold where it's like, okay, this isn't even worth finishing,
Yeah, right on. So do you ever experience, or how do you, if at all, experience kind of blocks when you're like, okay, I have this thing and it's done, and then there's that space between like preparing it for release and all the other kind of tasks that come along with that? Do you experience like kind of delay there, or is it usually something you're like, once you have a song that's done, the rest of it usually comes pretty easy for you?
I guess after the track is finished, like, then it's like cover art and like release plan, strategy, label or not. Do I want to just put it out as a single, or do I want to include it in a bigger album type of thing, just digital or physical? I mean, there's a whole host of things to think about after the song is done. Yeah, it also depends whether like I'm in album mode. Sometimes, like especially like now, I just put out an album like late last year. I'm not really in album mode at the moment, so like now I'm kind of in the process of like, oh, okay, you know what, if I make something that I like that doesn't fit into like a story or a theme of what I want to try to do next for my next album or whatever, I'll just put it out.
I guess, I mean, you just mentioned kind of there like the different release strategies a little bit, whether you do it independently completely or through the help of a label.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, do you generally consider one to be better than the other?
I'd say at the very beginning when I was just starting to like put music out, and I was kind of looking at the labels within like my sort of community and seeing what I was kind of just curious as as to what they really did, what they can really do for me. I guess in the early stages, releasing a label could be beneficial in the sense that you could leverage their platform and get your music out to their audience and do some sort of like cross-pollination there. But, nowadays I feel like I've released with several labels and I've kind of like figured out like which ones work for me, which ones work not as well for me. And then if I have something that fits, I'll just go back to certain labels and that type of thing. Like figuring out which ones work for me, I guess.
Do you have maybe a framework or a set of questions that you kind of ask yourself at this point where you are now and how you assess whether or not you're going to consider working with a label versus releasing something independently?
I guess just to paint the picture, like right now, the labels that I'm talking about are just like mainly just digital labels that are like in the beat, chill beats, lo-fi beat making community type of thing. So they're non-exclusive. They're just done by release. It's not like as high commitment as like a major label type of deal where it's like super exclusive. In these types of situations, I would probably look at things like if it's my first time working with a label, I would probably, you don't want to like give them stuff that's not your best work, but like, at the same time, if it's something that's like deeply personal to you, you might want to save that for a label that you've worked with in the past and that will take care of your release. It's leading off with something that's deeply personal with someone you're working with the first time. I've made that mistake before. And also know that like all terms are negotiable. Like at the beginning when I was just kind of like going through this label journey, I was like, I knew things were negotiable, but like at the same time, the bargaining power was so lopsided that I really, I've definitely signed some bad contracts where, the term of the release, like the lifetime of the contract was things like 10, 20 years. I was feeling like, oh wow, that's a long time to be signing your rights away, your master away. And just little things like that. Look at the terms, how long are you signing it away for? If it's your first time working with them, if so, don't lead off with something that's like super meaningful, like super deeply personal to you. Ask them about, what kind of promo plans they have for it. Are they doing physicals? What's the payout mechanism? Do they have a marketing budget?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, really, man. I mean, I think it sounds like in a way, if you don't know somebody very well, you should entrust them with something that you value really deeply, right? In a way, the first time you work with somebody or the first time you get to spend time with them, you got to kind of test the waters a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And then with time, you kind of build trust. Or maybe you find out that it's not a great fit, and you move on to another place.
Yeah.
But also that piece about negotiability is really cool. And so that idea that like everything is negotiable is really cool. And I'm curious, are there things that you've either listened to, read, or found elsewhere that maybe you can share that help other people kind of develop that attitude and that, willingness to kind of put themselves out there? Because I think oftentimes producers, artists in general, when they get opportunities, they get very excited about them to the point where they almost want that part of it to just be over, and move on.
Right.
And so it can be an uncomfortable place to be. And it's also not something most artists don't study law, and so it's something, and don't have a lot of experience negotiating, generally speaking. So I'm curious, if there's anything that you've found that helped you along that path.
A lot of it's just like reading through like the terms, they'll send you a contract and just read it through, like and use common sense. And, if something says, this is the term of this contract will be like 20 years, and just know that that's a very long time. It's not try. Are you comfortable with, granting them 20 years of, there's just stuff like, if anything jumps out at you, then it's probably something that's worth bringing up. But, at the same time, if you're just like testing out a label and, and if it's just like a single that, I guess that you like, but it's not like a deeply personal thing, at the same time, I guess you don't need to be too hung up on the terms if you don't want to. you know, also just know that walking away is fine. You know, you don't have to build relationships with everybody, you know, like just know that, or, you know, like even if you walk away, it doesn't mean you're burning a bridge, right? Like you're not, just know that walking away is also an option, you know, and just say, you know, you'll have something that's more fitting for them next time around.